Story sloth to story sleuth.
Oh.
What is that?
You've seen bits of my book. Yeah. Story sloth to story sleuth is about... So one of the ways we access the memory world is through senses and being aware of the world when you're in it. And very often, I find for myself, my thing that has been taught me through the world is to disconnect from the world. Lie on the couch, watch TV, read a book. Even reading a book is an escape. I love it, but I must admit it's an escape. Because the world is a place where there can be many things that we feel can injure us. And when we grow up, often as a kid, things just happen and you're like, oh, I need to protect myself. I'm going to just veg off and watch TV screens, which is, by the way, more and more happening now. I went out to dinner the other day and there were just kids. All the kids had screens. The place even had screens for the kids. I was like, wow. And so we can numb ourselves and turn into a bit of a sloth. We can lie on the couch and just be a sloth. So for me, a story sloth is somebody who just sits at home on the couch and just numbs out. And then when they're writing from a sort of a numbed out position almost. But a story sleuth is someone who's looking at the world, being open to the world, investigating the world, constantly finding stories everywhere because they are everywhere. And to do that, we have to be open to the world, slightly in some ways. We have to have our magnifying glass and look at the world and be open to it and allow our senses to operate and be present. This is, again, it links up to meditation, but being present in the moment of the world unfolding around us in order to be open to those stories that are out there. It can be traumatizing. For me, it can be, I'll see somebody walking across the road carrying a flip file and they're going somewhere and they're in a hurry and they dress smartly and I'm like, oh, that guy's going to a job interview and he looks so traumatized and I hope he gets his job interview. I can relate so much to the world. It can sometimes be a bit overwhelming, but I do think that is a trick for a writer, is to be a story sleuth and to go out there and find the stories because they are everywhere. They can be overwhelming as to how many stories there are actually. So if you're ever stuck, and often my book, the byline is Never Be Stuck Again because it's about breaking through writer's block, breaking through that limit that we can feel. If we walk around as story sleuths, there are just stories everywhere. And maybe that can be overwhelming, but also you could just write the story of the guy going to his job interview and that'll open up something. So yeah, for me, the movement from story sloth to story sleuth is moving from the couch into the world. And there's a great quote, which is something like, how vain it is to sit down and write when you haven't stood up to live. And I like that.
Oh, wow.
We need to stand up to live before we sit down to write.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so that's the story sleuth, going out there looking for stories and living in the world and being present and being open. Not too much because that can also drive you insane. But yeah.
Have you experienced writer's block?
Yes, I think I have experienced writer's block. Probably quite a lot. I have a few tricks that I do to avoid writer's block, but one of them is if I'm writing something, and I know that there's a really exciting scene that I'm going to write, and I'm heading up to that scene, then I'll just start writing the scene and I'll stop. I won't finish writing it, so that the next day when I have to sit down to write, I'm very excited about finishing that scene. When I experience writer's block, I almost feel like I've written everything out that I've got in me already in that one session of writing, and then I'm like, And then the next morning I wake up and I'm like, oh, well, where to now? So the excitement of writing helps me to stop writing a scene in the middle of the scene that I really want to write, and then keep that excitement for the next day. But that means already that I'm in a writing space where I'm writing every day. But to get into the place where you're writing every day can be even more difficult, I think. And that's where that's a bigger block. I think when people talk about writer's block, I think they're often talking about sitting in front of the computer, stuck. For me, it's real writer's block is I'm not even sitting in front of the computer. I'm not even near a computer. I'm somewhere else. I'm I don't know, on the couch, or I'm not even, I'm eating breakfast, or I'm not even at the computer yet. That's where the real blocks happen, because I'm not feeling that I have enough to say. Once I'm sitting at the computer, then another kind of a block can happen. But that's easily overcome by just writing anything. Professional writers do that. They just write every day. They just force themselves through the writing. And even if what they're writing they know is terrible, it's fine. I'll come back and I'll fix it later in the edit. And then that's a That's maybe a different kind of writer's block. But yeah, I've experienced both kinds. The sort of not even being able to sit in front of the computer writer's block, and then the sitting in front of the computer feeling blocked. It's a strange space, but for me, it does help to be able to tap into these wells. Like, okay, wait, what's my memory on this? I actually do have an interesting memory around this. Huh? And then writing it. Or, okay, wait a minute. Let me just be imaginative. Let me just be playful. Let me just imagine something totally random, and it's probably terrible, but I'm going to write it anyway. Or what other movies have I seen? Oh, yeah, there was a scene. Oh, that was cool. I can write that. So for me, tapping into the wells breaks through the writer's block very, very easily and very effectively. Yeah.
And aren't there many schools of thought on writer's block, even some where they say there is no such thing as writer's block?
Yeah. I think this is why when you ask me, have I ever experienced writer's block? I'm like, define writer's block. I don't really know when people talk about writer's block. And I don't mention it in my book. I just say never be stuck again. And I talk about the wells and how they can help us be creative, because I don't really know how to define writer's block. I think there may be many different kinds. Like as I'm talking about it now, I'm actually realizing, yeah, there's different kinds of writer's block. There's like resistance to writing in general. Then there's sitting in front of the computer and feeling like what you're writing is terrible and therefore not being able to write. So maybe that's two different kinds. And then, I don't know, maybe there's another kind, but yeah, I can think of two right now. And a lot of professional writers will say, no, there's no such thing as writer's block. You just sit down and write. And there is that. You just sit down and just type the words. What it feels like is it feels like I'm writing something that's really terrible. And this feels disgusting. But what I've learned to do is just push through that and write the disgusting stuff and then fix it later. Yeah.